Paris, 1980, April 15th. Over 50,000 people flood the streets. A funeral procession unlike any other. Not for a president, not for a war hero, for a philosopher. A small, cross-eyed man who spent his life in cafes, writing about freedom, nausea, and the unbearable weight of existence. Jean-Paul Sartre, dead at 74. And Paris weeps. But here's what they don't tell you. Sartre didn't just write philosophy. He lived it. Dangerously, obsessively, destructively. He rejected the Nobel Prize, refused wealth, embraced contradiction, lived in open relationships that scandalized Europe, supported revolutions that betrayed everything he believed. And through it all, he never stopped asking the one question that defined his entire existence. If God is dead, if there's no inherent meaning, if we're truly free, then what the hell are we supposed to do? Most philosophers write about ideas. Sartre became his ideas, and it destroyed him. Slowly, publicly, beautifully. Tonight, we don't just examine his philosophy. We examine his life, the contradictions, the relationships, the choices, the madness of trying to live as if freedom is absolute. Because Sartre proved something terrifying, that complete freedom isn't liberation. It's a burden most people can't carry. Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 to 1980, French philosopher, playwright, novelist, political activist, father of existentialism. To the world, he spoke of bad faith, authenticity, radical freedom. But behind the words was a man, flawed, brilliant, tormented, a man who lost his father at 15 months old, who grew up ugly and aware of it, who compensated with intellect, with words, with an almost superhuman work ethic that would eventually consume him. Sartre didn't just theorize about existence, he experimented with it, on himself, on his lovers, on his friends, on an entire generation that looked to him for answers he wasn't sure he had. This is the hidden codex, where we don't sanitize genius, we expose it, in all its glory and horror. Before we dive into Sartre's world, a warning. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of freedom, if you've realized that no one can tell you what your life should mean, if you understand that we're condemned to choose every single day who we become, subscribe to the Hidden Codex. Turn on notifications, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about freedom, love, and what it means to live authentically. Let's begin. 1905, Paris. Jean-Paul Sartre is born into a middle-class family. His father, Jean-Baptiste, a naval officer, dies when Sartre is barely a toddler, and this absence shapes everything. Sartre grows up in his grandfather's house, spoiled by his mother, raised on books, on ideas, on the promise that intelligence could compensate for anything, including the fact that he's short, cross-eyed, and by all conventional standards, not attractive. He knows this. Everyone knows this. And it creates a wound. A wound he'll spend his entire life trying to heal through philosophy, through relationships, through proving that the mind can transcend the body, that consciousness can overcome matter, that existence can be chosen, not given. At 15, Sartre reads Henri Bergson, and something shifts. He discovers philosophy isn't just abstract thought. It's a tool, a weapon, a way to tear apart reality and rebuild it according to reason. He devours Descartes, Kant, Hegel. By the time he enters the École Normale Supérieure in 1924, he's already decided. He will be a philosopher. Not just any philosopher. The philosopher. The one who finally explains what it means to exist in a world without God, without eternal truths, without inherent meaning. And at the École Normale, he meets someone who will change his life forever. Simone de Beauvoir, 1929. Sartre takes the agrégation exam, the most prestigious philosophy exam in France. He places first. Simone de Beauvoir places second, and they begin a conversation that will last 51 years. But this isn't a love story. Not in the traditional sense. Sartre proposes a pact. They will be together, but not exclusively. They will have what he calls a necessary love, essential, primary. But they will also have contingent loves, secondary relationships, affairs, freedom, because Sartre believes something radical, that love, real love, cannot exist without freedom, and freedom cannot exist without the possibility of choice, including the choice to love others. Simone agrees, and they never marry, never live together, never have children. Instead, they meet in cafes, the Café de Flore, Les Deux Magots. They write, they talk, they share everything, including their other lovers. And to the outside world, it looks like liberation, like the future of relationships, like proof that you can transcend jealousy, possession, ownership. But read their letters. Read Simone's memoirs. Read between the lines. And you see something else. Pain, confusion, the slow erosion of what could have been simple for the sake of what was supposed to be free. Sartre writes later, man is condemned to be free, not blessed. Condemned, because freedom isn't a gift, it's a responsibility, a weight. And in relationships, that weight becomes unbearable. Who do you choose? Who do you hurt? Who do you prioritize? And Sartre's answer was always the same. Choose freedom, even when it destroys you, even when it destroys others, because the alternative, settling into comfortable patterns, accepting social norms, living in what he called bad faith, was worse than any pain, or so he believed. 1938, Sartre publishes his first novel, Nausea, and it's unlike anything French literature has seen. The protagonist, Antoine Roquentin, is sitting in a park, looking at the root of a chestnut tree, and suddenly he's overwhelmed by the sheer, absurd existence of the root. It has no reason to be, no purpose, no meaning. It just is, existing, grotesquely, unnecessarily, and Roquentin feels sick, nauseated, by existence itself, by the fact that things are, without justification, without explanation, just brute, contingent, meaningless presence. This is Sartre's revelation. Existence precedes essence. We're not born with a purpose. We're not created for a reason. We simply exist, first, and only afterward do we create meaning, through our choices, through our actions, through the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. But those stories are never fixed, never final, never secure, because at any moment we can choose differently. We can become someone else, and that freedom, that radical openness, is terrifying. Most people run from it. They hide in roles, in identities, in the comfort of believing they have a fixed nature, a destiny, a predetermined path. Sartre calls this bad faith, the lie we tell ourselves to escape freedom, the pretense that we're not responsible, that circumstances made us who we are, that we had no choice. But Sartre insists we always have a choice, even in extreme situations, even in oppression, even in suffering. We choose how we respond, and that choice defines us, more than our past, more than our biology, more than our social conditioning. We are what we choose to be, nothing more, nothing less. And that's both empowering and crushing, because if we are our choices, then we're also responsible for everything, and that responsibility has no limit, no excuse, no escape. 1939. World War II begins. Sartre is drafted into the French army. assigned to a meteorological unit. He spends his time reading Heidegger, writing in his war diaries, thinking about freedom, facticity, being for others. Then, in 1940, he's captured by German forces, sent to a prisoner of war camp, and something unexpected happens. Sartre experiences community, real community, men thrown together by circumstance, creating meaning through shared struggle. He later writes that his time in the camp was one of the most authentic periods of his life, because the illusions were stripped away, the pretenses, the bad faith. They were just men, existing together, making choices, creating meaning from nothing. In 1941, Sartre is released. He returns to Paris, occupied Paris, Nazi Paris, and he faces a question that will haunt existentialism forever. What does freedom mean under oppression? If you're occupied, if your choices are constrained, if a refusal means death, are you still free? Sartre's answer is yes. Always yes. Because even under the worst conditions, you choose your attitude, your response, your meaning. The Nazis can control your body, but they can't control your consciousness, unless you let them, unless you surrender your freedom internally, unless you live in bad faith and pretend you have no choice. Sartre joins the resistance, not as a fighter, as a writer. He writes for underground newspapers, creates plays with hidden political messages, and in 1943, he stages his most famous play, No Exit. 3 people trapped in a room together, forever. Hell, but not fire and brimstone, just other people. Because Sartre understood something profound. Hell is other people, not because people are evil, but because other people see us, judge us, define us, and in their gaze we lose control over who we are. We become objects, things to be categorized, labeled, fixed, and that objectification, that loss of freedom to define ourselves, that's the real hell. The play ends with one of the most famous lines in modern theater. Hell is other people. But people misunderstand it. Sartre isn't saying people are terrible. He's saying our freedom is fundamentally threatened by the existence of others, because they see us differently than we see ourselves. And in that difference, conflict emerges. Eternal conflict. The struggle to maintain our own self-definition against the definitions others impose. You think you're brave. Someone else sees you as cowardly. You think you're kind. Someone sees you as manipulative, and you can never fully control how you appear, how you're interpreted, how you're judged. That's why relationships are so difficult. Not because we hate each other, but because we threaten each other's freedom to be who we choose to be. 1945. The war ends. Existentialism explodes. Suddenly, everyone in Paris is existentialist. The cafes are packed with young people wearing black, smoking, discussing bad faith and authenticity. Sartre becomes a celebrity, not just in France, worldwide. He gives lectures to packed halls. His books sell out. He's interviewed, photographed, quoted, and he embraces it, uses his platform, speaks out against colonialism, against capitalism, against oppression of any kind. He becomes the public intellectual, the engaged philosopher, the one who insists that philosophy must be lived, not just theorized. But fame brings complications. Sartre starts taking amphetamines, Coridrain, to keep up with the writing, the lectures, the meetings, the affairs. He writes 10, 12, 14 hours a day, fueled by pills and coffee. His output is superhuman. Novels, plays, essays, political manifestos. He's everywhere, doing everything, living at maximum intensity, because Sartre believes something dangerous. That, to live authentically, you must live fully. Embrace every possibility. Refuse nothing. say yes to experience, even when it destroys you, especially when it destroys you, because destruction is proof you're alive, proof you're free, proof you're not hiding in the comfortable mediocrity of bad faith. And his relationship with Simone continues, openly, publicly, scandalously. They share apartments in the same building but refuse to live together. They meet daily but maintain separate lives. And they both have other lovers. Many other lovers. Sartre becomes involved with a series of women, some brief, some lasting years. And Simone does the same. They tell each other everything, or claim to. The transparency is supposed to prove their freedom, their honesty, their refusal to live by conventional rules. But read Simone's letters to her lovers. Read Sartre's behavior, and you see the cracks. The jealousy disguised as philosophical consistency, the pain masked as intellectual agreement, the slow realization that maybe, just maybe, some structures exist for a reason. 1952, Sartre publishes Saint-Genet, a massive study of the writer Jean Genet, criminal, homosexual, outcast, and Sartre argues that Genet chose his identity, chose to embrace what society rejected, chose to become the thief, the deviant, the other, and in that choice, Genet found freedom, because he stopped trying to be what others wanted, stopped living in bad faith, started creating his own essence through deliberate action. This is Sartre's ideal, the person who accepts no predetermined identity, who refuses every category, who creates themselves from nothing, who lives in radical freedom, even if society condemns them, even if the cost is loneliness, even if the price is suffering. But here's what Sartre doesn't say. Here's what he can't say, because saying it would undermine everything. Creating yourself from nothing is exhausting. Refusing all structures is isolating. Living in absolute freedom is terrifying, because there's no rest, no certainty, no moment where you can say, "This is who I am," and stop choosing. Every moment demands a new choice. Every situation requires a new decision, and you're always responsible, always accountable, always aware that you could have chosen differently. That's why most people don't live this way, not because they're cowards, but because it's unsustainable. Because human beings need some stability, some rest from freedom, some moments of simply being without constantly choosing. 1964. Sartre is awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, the highest honor in the literary world. Recognition, validation, immortality. And Sartre does something no one expects. He refuses it, publicly, completely. He writes a statement explaining his decision. He says he doesn't want to be institutionalized, doesn't want to become a tool of bourgeois culture, doesn't want the prize to define him, because accepting it would be bad faith, would be allowing others to tell him who he is, would be surrendering his freedom to define himself. So he says no. To money, to prestige, to everything most people spend their lives pursuing. And the world is shocked, confused, fascinated. But here's the deeper truth. Sartre refuses the Nobel because he has to, because his entire philosophy demands it, because if he accepts, he admits that external validation matters, that recognition from institutions has meaning, that he's not completely free, that he's still dependent on the gaze of others. So he refuses, and in refusing, proves his point, or tries to. But you can't help but wonder, is refusing the prize freedom? Or is it just another form of performance? Another way of being defined by others? Because now he's the man who refused the Nobel. That's his identity. Fixed. Determined. By an act that was supposed to prove he's undetermined. The paradox is inescapable. The 1960s and 70s. Sartre turns fully toward politics. He supports the Algerian independence movement, opposes the Vietnam War, stands with student protesters in 1968, visits Cuba, meets Che Guevara, defends revolutionary violence as necessary for liberation, and his position is consistent. If freedom is absolute, then oppressed people have the right to seize it by any means necessary. If bad faith is the enemy, then systems that enforce bad faith must be destroyed. If authenticity requires breaking from imposed structures, then revolution is the ultimate authentic act, the colonized choosing to define themselves, the workers refusing capitalist definitions, the students rejecting authoritarian education. But Sartre's politics create problems. He supports the Soviet Union, then criticizes it after the Hungarian uprising. He defends Maoism, then questions it. He embraces various revolutionary movements, then watches them betray their principles. And slowly, painfully, Sartre realizes something he doesn't want to admit, that freedom isn't enough, that consciousness isn't enough, that good intentions aren't enough, that revolutions eat their children, that liberation movements become oppressive, that the people you fight for don't always become free. They become something else, something you didn't predict, something you can't control, because they have their freedom too, and they might choose differently than you hoped. By the 1970s, Sartre's health is failing. Decades of amphetamines, alcohol, cigarettes, relentless work. His eyesight deteriorates. He goes nearly blind. Can't read. Can't write. The man who lived through words loses access to them, and he's forced to rely on others, to be read to dictate, to accept help, to admit dependence. Everything his philosophy tried to deny. That we need others, that we're not self-sufficient, that radical independence is an illusion, that existence is always coexistence, that freedom is always freedom with others, that consciousness is always consciousness for others. And in those final years, something shifts in Sartre. You can hear it in his last interviews. A softness, a humility, a willingness to admit uncertainty. He tells Simone, "I failed." Not his work, not his ideas, his life. He failed to live up to his own philosophy, failed to be completely free, failed to escape bad faith, failed to create meaning from nothing, because in the end he needed structure, needed relationships, needed some form of stability, just like everyone else. The great philosopher of freedom discovered that freedom, absolute freedom, might not be possible, or desirable, or even meaningful. April 15, 1980. Sartre dies. Simone is with him, the woman he loved but refused to marry, lived with but refused to commit to, shared everything with except complete honesty, and she's devastated. She writes about his death, about sitting with his body, about the unbearable absence, and you realize something. Despite all the philosophy, despite all the talk of contingent loves and necessary freedoms, despite the pact and the affairs and the radical honesty, what they had was simple. They loved each other, deeply, painfully, imperfectly, and maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. Maybe that was everything. 50,000 people fill the streets of Paris for his funeral. Students, intellectuals, workers, people who never read his philosophy but understood he stood for something. Freedom, resistance, the refusal to accept what you're told, the insistence on thinking for yourself, on questioning authority, on living authentically, even if you fail, even if it's impossible, even if it destroys you, because trying to be free is better than accepting slavery. Trying to create meaning is better than accepting meaninglessness. Trying to live authentically is better than living in bad faith, even if you can't fully succeed, even if the project is doomed. even if the only certainty is uncertainty. Sartre's life was a series of contradictions. He preached freedom but became trapped by his own philosophy. He rejected institutions but became an institution. He insisted on independence but needed Simone. He claimed existence precedes essence but couldn't escape the essence others projected onto him. He said hell is other people, but spent his life surrounded by people. He refused the Nobel Prize but couldn't refuse the identity of the man who refused it. He wanted to be completely free but died dependent, blind, unable to work. And yet, through all these contradictions, he proved something. Not that his philosophy was perfect, but that it was real, that he tried, that he lived it, that he risked everything for an idea, even when the idea was impossible. Here's what most people miss about Sartre. He wasn't trying to create a perfect system. He was trying to wake people up, to shake them out of their comfortable sleep, to force them to confront the terrifying fact that they're free, that no one can tell them what their life should mean, that they're responsible, that they're alone in a fundamental sense, that the universe doesn't care, that there's no cosmic plan, that they have to choose every day, every moment, what they become. And most people can't handle that. So they hide. In jobs, in relationships, in beliefs, in anything that lets them pretend they're not free, that they have no choice, that circumstances made them who they are. But Sartre won't let you hide. He strips away the excuses, the justifications, the comfortable lies, and forces you to look at the truth. You're free, radically free, absolutely free, and that freedom is terrifying, because with it comes responsibility, total responsibility, for who you are, for who you become, for every choice, for every action, for every consequence. You can't blame your past, can't blame your genes, can't blame society, can't blame God because there is no God. You're it. You're the only source of meaning in your life. And if your life is meaningless, that's on you. If your life is inauthentic, that's on you. If your life is wasted, that's on you. No one else. Ever. And here's the question Sartre leaves us with. The question his entire life posed. Can you carry that weight? Can you live knowing you're completely free? Can you accept that responsibility? Can you create meaning from nothing? Can you choose who you are every single day without rest, without certainty, without any guarantee it will work? Or will you, like most people, like perhaps even Sartre himself, eventually seek refuge in patterns, in relationships, in structures, in anything that provides relief from the crushing burden of absolute freedom? Because Sartre proved something he didn't intend to prove, that humans need more than freedom. They need connection. They need structure. They need some form of meaning that isn't entirely self-created. They need to be part of something larger, not as an escape from freedom, but as a condition for freedom to be livable. Sartre's legacy isn't his philosophy, it's his life, the beautiful, terrible experiment of trying to live as if freedom is absolute. And the lesson isn't that he succeeded, it's that he tried, and in trying, showed us both the glory and the impossibility of his vision, that we are free, more free than we want to admit, and that freedom is both our greatest power and our heaviest burden. And how we carry that burden, how we use that freedom, what we create with that radical openness, that's the only question that matters. Not what is the meaning of life, but what meaning will you create? Not who are you, but who will you choose to be? Not what should you do, but what will you do, right now, today, with this one, unrepeatable, absolutely free existence you've been thrown into without asking, without instructions, without guarantees, with nothing but choice. Endless, unavoidable, terrifying, liberating. Choice. Jean-Paul Sartre lived and died trying to answer that question, not with words, with his life, and the answer he found was incomplete, contradictory, imperfect, but real as existence itself, as messy as freedom, as painful as consciousness. And maybe that's the point. Maybe there is no clean answer. Maybe the answer is the struggle itself, the attempt, the refusal to give up even when you know you'll fail, the insistence on living deliberately even when it destroys you, the choice to be free even when freedom is a burden you can barely carry. That's Sartre. That's existentialism. That's what it means to exist without essence, to live without guarantees, to be human in a universe that doesn't care, and to create meaning anyway. Because what else is there to do? If this challenged something you've been avoiding, if you recognize yourself in Sartre's struggle, if you want to explore what the great minds discovered about freedom, consciousness, and the weight of existence, subscribe to the Hidden Codex. Hit that like button if you're still carrying the weight, because we don't offer easy answers here. We go into the darkness where the real questions live. Next time, we'll explore another philosopher who lived dangerously, who pushed consciousness to its limits, who proved that ideas aren't just thoughts, but ways of being. You don't want to miss it. Until then, remember, you're free. Absolutely, terrifyingly, beautifully free. And what you do with that freedom is the only thing that will ever truly be yours.